What the hell is Sauce Sports or whatever that last call was talking about? What the hell is that?
Guys are from Free Love, man.
What's the motherfucking deal, man? Welcome to Sauce Sports. If you're not familiar with Sauce Sports is a Houston, Texas homer network. Means we're talking all sports, but only Houston. This is the Texas channel. If you want the other Houston sports takes, make sure you go to saucesports.tv. But this is the freshest flavor in H-Town sports. Let's talk about it, man. I want to get into the three biggest concerns that I have about this Houston Texans offensive line. And if you want fresh Houston Texans takes every day, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And we'll be getting back to the live streams on a regular basis here shortly. Make sure you're following on all the proper social medias, and I will update you with that information. But let's stop wasting time. Let's get into the first biggest concern that I have when it comes to this Houston Texans offensive line. The first biggest concern that I have with this Houston Texans offensive line is consistency. We started out training camp with no Nick Martin. Then you have Kalil going down, who hasn't been around for a couple of weeks. You had Titus starting out as a tackle, then moving to guard. You had Greg Manx going down in the Green Bay preseason game. You had Fulton filling in. Now Titus goes out. Now that Nick Martin is back, you have a battle between, or perceived battle between, in the eyes of the fans, between Kalil and Roderick Johnson. But yet Bill O'Brien says Kalil's the starter, even though he's been injured. Hasn't really been participating as much and has been getting washed in practice. But we don't want to get into that. I just want to talk about the consistency along that offensive line. And the reason why consistency is an issue when it comes to offensive linemen is communication is key in football, from the secondary to your linebackers to your D linemen. But it's no more important anywhere else on the field besides the offensive line. You got five guys that need to move as one. They need to understand each other's habits and tendencies. And when a guy is missing who may have a particular skill set and his habits and tendencies are known by some but not by others, or they don't have the experience, they don't have the time to really gel together, that's my big issue. You got the season started in a couple of weeks. You have one final preseason game in which the starters are really going to get a good look. You saw the first preseason game, the second preseason game. The starters on the offensive line got the most time. You didn't see Deshaun the first one. You saw him a little bit in one drive in the second, but you saw that offensive line out there for most of the halves. And so to me, this is concerning because this is going to be the last real chance, because we know the fourth preseason game, starters really don't get a lot of time, if any at all. It's more of the kind of guys at the bottom of the roster, guys on the bubble, who have a chance to make a name for themselves. So with Titus being injured, he hasn't had any chance to work with Nick Martin, have any understanding of his tendencies, what he's likely to do. And then Nick Martin is the same way. You could talk about visual reps, but I don't think those work quite the same, especially on the offensive line. You need to learn how to move as a unit, especially when in the preseason you haven't seen a lot of exotic looks, been a lot of base stuff. They've been going against three-man fronts, haven't really been giving them a real look. And so they need that experience, especially when it comes to picking up blitzes, when it comes to picking up more exotic packages and understanding who has who's doing what, sliding protect, all these things that are very important. So the lack of consistency concerns me probably more than anything else. But let's get into the second thing that we need to be concerned about when it comes to talking about this offensive line of the Houston Texans in 2019. The second biggest concern I have when it comes to this Houston Texans offensive line, I alluded to in the first concern, and that is health. You saw at the start of training camp, no Nick Martin. Saw the first preseason game, Greg Manx goes down. Fulton's your guy for a couple of weeks. Nick Martin finally comes back week 3 of the preseason. Now Fulton's getting moved, and now Titus is out. You see Kalil has been out. Health is a huge issue when it comes to this offensive line, and it's very concerning because I don't think we have a lot of depth in any of these positions. So I think it's very concerning, not only for these guys, who's going to be the starter, who's going to be a backup or anything like that, but I think it's a problem for protecting Deshaun Watson. I alluded to consistency, that goes right along with health, that goes right along with, not putting guys in the best position to win. You had guys who were expected to play in one position, they end up playing another position, the young guys, and it is what it is. If they're doing well in those positions, there's no complaints. But your health is your wealth. Availability is the best ability. You've heard that 1,000 times. So when you have had multiple linemen missing several weeks, and again, this is almost a relatively new unit, you've seen some of the guys lower on the depth chart not play as well. It's very concerning because it's going to look like a similar situation to what you saw last year. We saw Henderson go out in week 1, and then I think that started a domino effect of how that offensive line continue to play throughout the season. So health is a very big concern. And if you're not going into the season healthy, a lot of these injuries can linger. A lot of these injuries can be re-aggravated. And that bodes for a very long season, a long 16-game, hopefully more than 16-game season. And again, that affects the consistency, the continuity, and the unity between that offensive line. But let's get into the third biggest concern that I have with this offensive line. And it might be the most important, but let's just get into it. And for the third and possibly most important concern that I have with this Houston Texans offensive line is talent. Once you get past that starting group and you have questions about the starting group, there's certain positions where you don't even know the guys' names who are behind. A lot of new additions. I don't know who's behind Henderson at right tackle. It was originally slated that Sharpring and Howard were going to be tackles. These guys have been moved inside to guard. And I'm not going to complain about that because if they look good there, then, no complaints. But outside of Nick Martin, who's back up as Greg Banks, and I think the fan base has a more favorable opinion of Greg Banks than Nick Martin. But we know this coaching staff, they operate on their own accord. They do what they're going to do. So it kind of is what it is at this point. But you talk about guys like Kelimete did not have a great season last year. Martinez Rankin did not have a great season last year. Julian Davenport, not really a fan favorite too much. These are guys, we haven't even seen Julian Davenport, and he was supposed to be the backup left tackle, if I'm not mistaken. You saw Roderick Johnson get the look over him. And Roderick is not necessarily new to this organization, so it makes you wonder, are the Texans forcing guys in position for whatever reason? Are they trying to make things work that are not really working? We can talk about last year when Henderson went down and Rankin had to come in having no real preseason experience, having no real OTA experience because he had the injury. And they asked Rankin, well, where is he more comfortable playing? As a coaching staff, you should know where these guys fit best. And we saw that Rankin was almost detrimental to Sean. How many plays did he give up? We can talk about when he missed that block. Then fortunately, Lamar Miller took on two blockers, and Watson was able to score. But then Lamar Miller ends up getting injured after that. There's a lot of factors that go into this, and we can talk about the Dillard pick. If the Texans were slightly more aggressive, he's probably the number one. I know you use stat sexuals like PFF. I'm not a big fan, so I'm not going to go wholly by that. But to give you a point of reference, because I know a lot of you guys like PFF, Dillard is rated as the number one offensive tackle in the preseason. But a lot of you guys said he was overrated, or the Texans didn't really want him, and this wasn't a reach. And this is not to knock Howard, because Howard is ranking as one of the lower end, one of the worst. But that's at tackle. At guard, I think he's playing a little bit better, so I'm not going to complain about that. And, you got to dance with the one you're with. But this just kind of all points back to the aggressiveness or lack of aggressiveness as this team as far as going out and securing talent, going into a win-now mentality, and being willing to take risks to put these pieces around Deshaun Watson to protect him. Deshaun Watson is the most important asset on this team. You may have other favorite players. You may be a fan of whomever else. But as Deshaun Watson goes, this offense goes, he's created a lot of this on his own. Some of the success that we saw last year, even some of the closer games where there were losses. Give credit to Deshaun Watson for it. People who want to say he holds the ball too long and does all stuff. It's the pieces that you put in front of him that he's forced to make these plays. He's forced to get out of pocket and try to make something happen and go off schedule. Because we're not putting the talent in front of him to give him a clean pocket for him to operate. And we saw in that first preseason game the second preseason game against Detroit, it almost looked surgical. It was accuracy. He was putting the ball on point. He had time. He was comfortable. If you give Deshaun Watson a clean pocket throughout the season, he could be MVP. And this is not being a homer. This is just saying that he has all the tools, but he's not available. He's not able to use the tools successfully when he's consistently under pressure. Again, 62 sacks, I believe 130-something hits, an egregious number of times that he's been touched because of the poor protection. I want to say fifth most in history of sacks given up by a team. The Texans did not operate with urgency when it came to securing talent. You still got Trent Williams out there. I don't know what the Redskins want. I don't know if they place a very high value on an older tackle, but who is a very talented tackle. Not going to complain about that. Not even going to really get into that. That's a whole different conversation. But talent is very concerning on this team because if any one of these guys go down, we can tie back into the first two things I said. Health. Somebody goes down, now you got some no-name or some underperforming guy coming in. You're having to count on him and rely on him again, putting a weak link in that line, and then back to more pressure for Deshaun. And then you talk about continuity and consistency. If he's not on the same page with everyone else because he hasn't been getting the reps with these guys, because he's not understanding how these other guys operate. Again, weak link in the armor and a lot more pressure on Deshaun Watson. So I think the Texans may have improved, may not have improved. I think it's yet to be seen. But to me, that's the third biggest concern that we have with this Texans team. But I got a bonus concern that I'm going to bring up to you right after this. So I appreciate you for checking out my 3 biggest concerns. And again, stay tuned because I have a bonus concern coming up right after this. But make sure you're following Saw Sports on all the proper social medias right there at the bottom of the screen. If you want to support the Saw Sports channel, and I appreciate everybody who has, you can go to the links in the description below. There's many different methods in which you can do that. I know a lot of people have been asking about the streams. I'll inform you on that. Make sure you're following on Saw Sports. I'll try to give you guys an update today or tomorrow as far as how the streams are going to operate, pregame shows and things like that. Make sure you're part of the Saw Sports Facebook group. Again, link in the description below. And subscribe to the Saw Sports podcast. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen. Every major platform for podcasting. Make sure you tune in. I'm going to start dropping a lot more content on that. Trying to give you some daily podcasts to keep up with what's going on around the town, not just Texans, but all Houston sports. But again, I'm your boy at Honcho. I appreciate everybody who's been showing love. And I mean, let's just get into this bonus concern that I don't know, it sounds weird, bonus concern, but this additional concern that I have when it comes to the Houston Texans offensive line, and let's get into it now. The bonus concern that I have, again, bonus concern sounds weird. When it comes to this Houston Texans team is the starters. And what I mean by that is it's 2 positions specifically. We've seen the Roderick Johnson and Matt Kalil situation. And we've seen Bill O'Brien double down on Kalil is going to be the starter. He continually makes references to Roderick saying, well, can he do it consistently? It was only 1 game. Yeah, he had a good practice. But what have we seen from Kalil with any consistency? You're talking about a guy, an older guy, compared to a guy who's about 7 years younger, who's basically, in our eyes, from what we've seen, outperformed him when given the opportunity. And to me, showed more consistency. Again, you can talk about, it was backups for Detroit, it was backups for the Packers. You can talk about, the looks that they were getting. You can talk about a lot of different things. But to me, the Texans do this thing with players, not just on the offensive line, but all the way across the board, and they force guys into a position. And that means, like, if they spent capital on you, the draft position, if they spent money on you in free agent, they force them on the field, even though there may be a player or maybe a more talented guy that's available. So instead of cutting their losses, they're willing to try to fit, pieces in place when there's better talent available. This is something they've been doing for years. Then I kind of want to look at the Nick Martin and Fulton situation, where if Fulton has looked like a better center, if Fulton has looked like a guy that he can take that position, there needs to be an open competition. Or if there's an open competition everywhere else, or maybe the Texans feel like they have guys to play, I don't know. To me, there's no consistency yet, so everything should be open. I think everybody's spot should be up for challenge, but again, capital, they're going to give guys a chance to keep their spots or whatever they want to do. But I think the 2 starting positions that need to be evaluated is left tackle and center. If Roderick's your better guy, give Roderick the go-ahead. If Fulton seems to be performing better, give Fulton the go-ahead. You have to be willing to cut your losses and field the best team. I don't feel like the Texans do that. I think the Texans take whoever they've put the most capital in, and somehow maybe they think it's going to translate. We'll be investing a lot in you, and somehow it's going to play out on the field. And that's who needs to play. But I don't think that's going to happen. And that's not even on the players. That's on the coaching staff. So that's another concern that I have. That's my bonus concern. But I appreciate y'all watching the video. I appreciate y'all watching the video. I'm chunking up a deuce. Y'all be cool like y'all be cool. It's your boy at Honcho. I'm out. Make sure I hit the subscribe button. I'm going.
Perfect.